Hello, everyone. This is Professor Hamamoto, and it is January 25th already, year 2022, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I am so happy, so gratified to be with you here today. And I'm glad you're with us here in the live chat. And for those of you who are going to watch the recorded version, well, I welcome you as well. The viewership's going up and up and up. And toward that end, by the way, I am, this is a good problem to have, I guess, but there's so many people now in the live chat that I've been getting complaints, constructive criticism that I'm taking up too much time doing all the welcoming. So, I can accept criticism. It's done with good intention. So I'm going to have to forego that. But if I can finish up in time, then I'll go back and look into the chat and see if there might be some questions or comments that I can address, and that'll be a more productive use of your time as well as my own, because I have a lot, especially today. I mean, every talk I give, I'm continually running out of time, which is okay, because I'm going to be writing about this. I can do a more extended probe, if you will, on these topics or these particular case studies in written form. So, Christy and Gonna Cry 96 Tears and Michael Charlie and David Underdown and Troposkunk and Rick Olson and Paul Hudson and Tyrone Sargent and Melissa and Ayape and Piper Fogel, Christopher Lee. Yeah. So anyway, I violated my own oath there, but anyway, I'm sure you'll understand because today we're going to talk about how truth. This is a good talk. I know it's sad and it's tragic because of the victims that were involved, but I'm giving this talk in the best of moods because I came through this book with and I'll show it to you in a moment on camera. I came to this book with the expectation, and again, I love it when my expectations are always shattered in a good way. And I don't always have low. I usually have high expectations of everything, and I'm always disappointed. But I thought this book that I'm about to talk about in a moment was going to be just a litany, not but just mostly an emotional rehashing. And I'm not denigrating that because it's important, as I'll talk about in a moment. But just a primarily subjective response to the victimage, and it was substantial and it's long lasting. And I understand that. But beyond that, if there is a beyond that, I'm looking for solutions. I'm going to put, well, I can't say an end to it. I'm not that naive. I think problems like this are going to be with us so long as evil walks the earth. That's that's a sin, right? That's humanity. But we can mitigate, we can reduce, and there's a lot that can be done by people in the community. That involves any number of professionals, non-professionals, church members, the community. Everybody can be involved in this. And that's the good news, because in this case, it worked. And it tells me that despite all our hardships and all our struggles that we're going through right now in 2022, there is a way out. But as this book illustrates quite well, that it underscores what probably you already know, but it underscores and gives us concrete examples of how we can overcome the most grievous forms of tyranny, of political oppression. And I'll leave it to you to draw the parallels between the grooming of a certain cohort. They were amateur gymnasts aspiring to the highest levels of competition, including college, university scholarships, and maybe even the Olympics. Okay. But these lessons can be applied to any institution, the university, all the, the talk is incessant about critical race theory. I think it's not that productive. It's being thrown out there so that we will ignore some of the deeper problems. That is these mad scientists running around developing mRNA and all that, and then doubling back, saying, "Oh no, we didn't really mean to have it used on the public, right?" To kind of cover themselves. But anyway, that's also an example, by the way, of how this work that we're doing here, getting the information out, and with I call it cultural forensics, but there are different approaches, of course. But this work that we're doing here is yielding positive change in a fairly short time. I mean, the sooner the better. But and ironically, it's being made possible by these so-called social media, which are also the most censored form of media. Well, maybe newspapers are too, but so far as electronic media, they have the monopoly on it. But that too can change. That too can change. We can break the stranglehold of TubeU and But Facebook and all the other, and it's already happening. There's Gab and you know all the different alternatives. It's competition, and that's why our model of society, pluralistic competition amongst groups, peoples, in a sportsmanlike fashion as possible. And of course, there's always people who want to game the system, right? We're on guard for them. And we're going to talk about these people who try to game the system. And we're going to talk about the people who know how to game the gamers, right? Including this one person by the name of Rachel Den Hollander. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but Den Hollander I will use. And here's the book here. It's called What is a Girl Worth? And like I said, I was kind of thrown off by the title and my own expectations. The book is wonderful, and it's again just another example of how we are gradually, maybe not as fast as we would like, but we are incrementally, let's say. Well, it's faster than I think it's accelerating. I think the rate of change in our favor is accelerating. And that's good, but we have to keep up the struggle. We cannot ever let down, and we cannot ever back off, because once we do, then the other side makes their move, right? If you yield, they will take that space that you vacate. So we remain vigilant every day. You wake up every day with the warrior mentality. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean that quite literally. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more of that in future talks from my background, right? Because, I talk about the men of honor, the Siciliani, right? The Sicilian Americans, and, the various mobs and the Irish mafia, the Jewish mafia, and all the black gangsters and all that. We don't get much play so far as the Asian criminal tradition is going to go. So I'm going to fill that void. I mean, my heritage is being co-opted by ass clowns like who really got his education in a video store, right? The world's oldest fanboy, Quentin Tarantino, and those people, right? Or the ass clowns who went to college and came up with the Karate Kid series, right? So I'm going to retake that heritage, reclaim it. I mean, it's mine already, but I'm going to share it with you. That's a better way of putting it. Not because of my own ego gratification, not as a form of payback, but I believe that traditions that I represent, that embodied my own, that epigenetically, culturally, historically, politically, are mine, are my birthright, will benefit you. Just like when reading about the men of honor, that helps me how to figure out to get to survive in a system that's unequal, it's unfair, it's unjust, it's violent, it's brutal oftentimes. I mean, we're seeing pictures of people getting beat down for doing nothing than assembling peacefully to protest unlawful, unjust actions on the part of elective officials, right? And all of you share the same frustration as most of us about justice. That's why I tried to in a previous talk about a higher justice that we can achieve. And because we're not going to depend solely, we're going to work them, but we're not going to depend solely on the courts anymore. We're not going to depend on the great man, Orange Man, Donald Trump. He sold us out, right? Sorry if you're a Trump fan, you're still on the train. It's, get real. At a certain point, you got to wake up and say, "Hey, man, we're being groomed and we've been played." And remember, I'll tell you, I voted for him twice, not for the reasons that most people. Oh yeah, Trump is going to say it. No, I voted him in because I practice the Japanese azato ichi strategy, which is you go into town as the Ronin, the masterless samurai. He got fired. The daimyo got taken over, so all the samurai got uh, pushed out and called Ronin, which is the wave man. And again, put all the popular culture stuff that's been appropriated, put that out of your mind because this is a real history. It's not some storybook by Frank Miller from DC Comics who calls his it's very well done for what it is, but that's not what I'm talking about here. So the my not Satuichi, my that's Katsu Shintaro. I misspoke. I'm talking about the Yojimbo strategy, and that's where the masterless wave man, he's a mercenary, goes into the village and he hires himself out to both sides, right? And you can hire yourself out to multiple sides. It doesn't have to be just two. But for the sake of storytelling, Kurosawa just had these two village uh, mafias, gangs fighting it out to take control over it. And it's a metaphor for the large society, right? It's a microcosm and then there's a macrocosm. So he's talking about Japanese politics. He's talking about world politics. You always have these factions that are grappling. And you and me, we can go in there and cause them to fight amongst each other. And then they will neutralize one another, just like the elites are busy neutralizing themselves within the Davos conference itself. Even within these congressional informal hearings that are happening, you can see that there's a lot of jostling and fighting and backing down or walking back from the strategy that they thought they were going to be able to impose on us, and we were going to submit to it. So the Yojimbo strategy works, and I thank you for helping to implement. I hope you do it at your work. I certainly did. It helped my career. I approached my whole career with that mentality that nobody's going to help me. You can't trust anybody. Uh, I'm putting it in global. You do have to trust people. Let me walk that back a little bit. But the people that you ordinarily would think about trusting, the police department, the campus police, the elected officials, the judge, the lawyer, or the department chair, or the person who runs some sort of whistleblowing office in your university, or the local newspaper, the Sacramento Bee or the Davis Enterprise or the campus newspaper. They're not going to help you. And I have many, and I'm telling you this out of my own experience. All right. So out of your own survival, you've got to develop the Yojimbo method of self-defense, which is really self-offense. And it works. It's worked for hundreds of years. It's worked since the 13th century in Japan. Again, I'm talking about my tradition. You know all about the, Northern European and the Anglo-American wars, and but even though Asia is on the ascendancy, people can just say, "Oh, the Chacoms are getting over them." Before that, "Oh, the Japanese are taking them." Okay, without even really understanding the deep historical context out of which these rivalries go. And by the way, we can also play against uh, People's Republic of China. We can also play them off, and that's what diplomats do. The great game is about playing off one power against another. So the Yojimbo strategy is very, Zbigniew Brzezinski, right? He called it the great game, right? But the deal is that there are millions of lives at stake, and it's not a game. It's not a game to the girls, the teenagers and even younger girls that were victimized by this guy who called himself Dr. Larry Nassar. And I say doctor because he got his medical license stripped. Okay, victory. It can happen because we all know about tons and tons of stories of these malpractice people who open up shop again. He's not going to open up shop any time soon because he'll probably die in prison. This is Larry Nassar. That's the photo you saw on the in the YouTube graphics there. That's Dr. Larry Nassar. And he liked to be called Larry, not Dr. Nasser, Larry. It's just plain Larry. And that's part of the con man, gaining the confidence of people. Oh, I'm Dr. Larry Nassar. I've written this book that's in wide use about therapy, and maybe he did, and maybe it's useful. And I'm employed at Michigan State University. I don't think he was a faculty person, but I think he had some sort of professional class rating or ranking or standing at the Michigan State University. I know he did. I don't know what his job title was. If I was going to write a book on it, I would find those details for you and for the reader, that is. And he also was the official team doctor for USA Gymnastics, or USAG. That's their acronym. By the way, I'll tell you right up front, another good piece of information, not just that Larry Nassar is in prison. He was convicted on multiple counts of sex crimes and possession of child pornography. And I'll get more into the details later. Or you can read up on the details yourself, because I can't cover it all. I'm trying to do a more overview of the Nasser case. And I'm trying to use the Nasser case, again, as a microcosm of how we could use the lessons learned from this incredible book by Rachel Denhollander, how we could use it to win back our freedom, our liberty in the beloved American Republic, and how we could set an example for the freedom-loving people, humanity, the world over. And these principles are now universal. They're at least on paper, right? People subscribe to these Enlightenment rational procedures that were crafted over decades and centuries that came out of Western Europe. Now they are the global norm. And that's not to say that there's any place on earth that enforces these norms 100%. But it seems like we're on the rise around the world, not just in the US. We are reasserting this, we are recapturing that heritage, which is now global in scope. And it did come from Western Europe. It ironically, it came from the British Isles and all the different wars and rivalries and infighting and civil wars from their history that they inscribed in common law, English common law, which of course migrated to the U.S. and other parts of the world, where there was Anglo-American presence, the Scottish, Irish, Welsh diaspora, Australia, New Zealand, Commonwealth of Canada, as well as other cultures. Hong Kong has that tradition as well. Malaysia, I believe, has inscribed that. Anyway, you get the point. It's these are universal norms here, not always and not equally applied, but that's our job to try to see that these norms are applied. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I forgot to mention the USAG was decertified. I think it was by the U.S. Olympic Committee, or maybe it was the International Governing Board of the Olympics. The international, I can't remember. You'll have to find that out. But the point is that the monopoly of this powerful organization that itself was trying to suppress the truth and to silence the voices of these girls and their parents and their advocates, they're gone. They're out of the picture. This is not in the book here, because I think it happened after the publication of the book, or she just couldn't cover everything. So the USAG, maybe they'll come back. Who knows? But the point is that the larger governing bodies recognized that they were part of the problem, USAG, and if they wanted to salvage any part at all of the gymnastics competitive sport, right, at the amateur level, I don't think there's professional, but amateur gymnastics, they're going to have to make changes. And you can say the same with the medical profession in the US. You can say the same with the pharmaceutical profession or industry, let's call it. And you can say the same with academia. Unless these changes are made, you are going to go out. You're gone. You're already beginning to lose standing and ground, right, amongst the public. And that brings me to a point I was going to mention later, but I might as well state it now. So one of the key strategies, that's not how I read this book, by the way, not the sad stories, right? We can get them elsewhere. We can watch The View or Oprah Winfrey or one of these chat shows. And they want you to go on the show and cry and be emotional. And, I'm not trying to make fun of it, but I'm saying that's one of the ways CNN and Fox TV and all those try to get us away from thinking about the deep structural institutional crimes that are being committed here. Right. So what was it? Where was I going to go with that? Anyway, it'll come back to me. Yeah. The biggest contribution, and she just talks about it in one sentence. This could have been a whole chapter. Maybe that'll be a second volume. Rachel Denhollander, who, by the way, is an attorney by profession. And that's another reason why I left this book on the shelf for a while, because I knew she was, and I don't know, I don't want to read turgid legal prose. Have you ever read briefs and transcripts? It's necessary, but it's not the most exciting reading. And I have a hard time keeping it all together so far as all the different timelines and all the information, but it's not like that at all. It's kept to a minimum if any of you are having second thoughts about buying the book. But one of the main lessons I got out of it is that we have to change the public perception. You have to change the public perceptions. And that's what we're doing, I believe, here. That's why I come out here twice a week, in order to shape, to rechange, reform, maybe overturn, upset, if at minimum, common public perceptions, right? That is what my charge is myself. Well, that's what I did professionally for more like 30, 40 years. But that's what I did most of my professional life. And of course, toward the end, they didn't want you to do that. They wanted you to repeat, replicate, reproduce all the garbage that was coming out of NATO and the Pentagon. These are all PSYOP, right? In order to demoralize the American people, beginning with college, university age students who they want to groom to become these compliant implementers and managers of sex crimes, really, because that's where all this was going. It was going to be institutionalized sex crimes, condoned, if not promoted, by all the different federal, state, and local institutions, down to the schools. That's where we were heading, right? With what is it called? Gay book reading time, where you have all the trannies and makeup going to the schools and playing with the children, right? That would be J.M. Barrie's, that's the guy who wrote Peter Pan. I'm reading about his background too, because I gave that earlier talk on Leaving Neverland. That's part of the cultural forensics methodology. We go to the roots of where it's coming so that we can uproot the evil. Of course, there's always a little bit of the root that stays in there and it regrows. So we always must tend the garden and keep weeding. Let's say we're not the weeds, Margaret Sanger. You're the weed. And we're going to uproot you, and we're going to keep uprooting you, and we're not going to buy your fertilizer anymore. Oh man, victory is sweet. It's not final victory. That's why I changed the title of this talk. I didn't say triumphing over tyranny or victory over tyranny. I said prevailing over tyranny, because it's always in flux. It's an ebb and flow. There's only winning and victory. That's sports, W and L. You know the outcome of a game, and that's it. But life is not like that. That's why we like sports, maybe, because there is a definitive winner or a loser. So I want us to get used to the idea that we will do whatever it takes to engage the enemy and its different strategies. We have to recognize it. We have to smoke them out. And that was Trump's contribution. He did smoke out the enemy, and he did force them to come out and really reveal who they are and what lengths they will go to in order to keep us as a captive population. So I'll say, he sold us out in some aspects. But even then, people such as that can be useful for our own purposes. And it's really up for us to take those gains, those contributions, and make something out of them. So yeah, changing public perceptions. We're doing it every day. That's at least what I try to. I don't know if I'm a success in it. That's up for history to decide. But I think I'm making, and I think you're making incredible progress. And once I start writing this up and getting this out, if I can even get a hearing and distribution and book contracts and all that, and I don't really care now because as we've learned, there are, even with its faults, YouTube and whatnot, Twitter and so-called social media, we don't have to depend on the gatekeepers anymore as much, not anymore, but as much. I don't have to go to a major publisher. I can go around them. I can self-publish. This information is going to get out, however, by whatever means necessary. And you know who said that? They shot him. They assassinated him. Talking about Detroit Red, otherwise known as Malcolm Little, otherwise known as Malcolm X. So now originally I was going to take a more pessimistic approach to this talk. The original title was Dr. Larry Nassar and the Grooming of America, because what I was seeing in microcosm with Dr. Larry Nassar taking advantage of all the gymnasts. They weren't all gymnasts. They were people who were in athletics, right? Probably baseball players, football, swimmers, whatever. But Rachel Denholder and her cohort were gymnasts. So I'm saying gymnasts. But I saw that as a microcosm of what the respected authority figures, many of them wearing the white coats like Dr. Robert Malone or Dr. Anthony Fauci and these other people. Fauci's going to hang with it until he hangs. He's going to keep repeating his story. And I'm not calling for his hanging. Now, he has nowhere out. He's painted himself into the corner. But the other people are starting to run away from it, as I've told you. And because it's CYA at this point. It's like, oh, no, I didn't have anything to do with it, boss. But this is in microcosm what Larry Nassar was doing, what has been going on with America, with our trusted figures or figureheads, really. And again, I said at the top of this talk, this is a reminder that justice, the higher justice, stays with us. It always has. It always has. We have farmed it out to specialists, including the law profession, the judicial system, the police department. We farmed it out to specialists. And I don't mean to denigrate the average policeman or police person. I don't mean to denigrate the average attorney, although there's probably a high quotient or percentage of attorneys I would denigrate. But as shown in this particular book, there are a lot of good attorneys, including Rachel Denholder. And she passed the bar examination. She has a law degree and she passed the bar. I assume she didn't talk about it because that was the nature of the book, but maybe she practices law now. I don't know, but that's not the point. She had the help of some very high level, they had law degrees, people, the attorney general of the state of Michigan came through, right? So let's not have this loser attitude. Oh, we can't beat the system, or it's useless. Our voice is not heard. Yeah, you're going to have a struggle. You're going to have a hard time having your voice heard, right? But it's worth it. You have no choice. No matter worth it or not, whether you don't have it. I don't have a choice. What are the alternatives? Grievous injury, death, perhaps at the outset, if we submit to these acts of tyranny, right? Now I'm talking more of the more macro threat that we're experiencing here. But again, I see what Larry Nassar was doing as a microcosm of what someone like an Anthony Fauci was doing. Oh, trust me, I have the white coat. I've been with the CDC for 50 years. I was there when HIV and AIDS was engineered in the laboratory, and I'm still here. And you're not going to be able to do anything about it because I'm Dr. Anthony Fauci. We haven't heard much from him lately. Maybe someone swept him off the chessboard. I wouldn't be surprised if one of his co-ethnics said, Dr. Fauci, you screwed up my life. You injured my child. so-and-so, my friend, my family member died because of your misinformation, and we're going to handle it the old Siciliani way, right? In the old country, right? You disrespect somebody, you don't know to go to the carabinieri, you don't go to the local magistrate, you just settle it amongst yourself, right? There used to be a system, and I don't even call it vigilante because that's something that the law and the police establishment invented, so we don't defend ourselves. We're leaving ourselves open to the predations of very skilled psychopath. I'm not talking about the street people, the street psychopath. We can handle them. I'm talking about the professionals who are of the psychopathic bent. So perhaps, and I'm hearing, by the way, not in his case, but I'm hearing that some of these characters out there are being swept off the chessboard by individuals who don't have any compunctions about of achieving the higher justice on their own. They're not going to go through the court system. And the people who are getting beat down in Australia, those family members are not going to be happy about that. If you kill them or maim them, if you're one of those people in your little mobilized tank outfit, that's not going to protect you. You can have the helmet and the visor and the shoulder pads and the truncheon and the bear gas. You can spray them down and hose them down, but man, by and by, someone's going to be waiting for you. So stand down. Stand down. I've seen this happen. I saw it happen at UC Davis. The corrupt chancellor was taking money here and there, which is fine, petty corruption. Okay, fine, do it. I'm not saying do it. I'm just saying, but when you start ordering innocent protesters who have a right to assemble in our country, you were born in Greek and you've grown up in a junta authoritarian society, which was, by the way, paid by the CIA. And I knew you grew up in that system, ex-Chancellor Katehi. But this is America, and you are not going to get away with spraying people down. And I personally made sure that you didn't get away with it, right? Because you're out of a job now, aren't you? So am I. I went down too. But you left before I did. I got rid of you before you dropped. Because guess what? I used the Yojimbo patented method that I got from Kurosawa Akira, the director. Kurosawa Kantoku, director Kurosawa. Check out his films. You're already seeing them plagiarized by George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola and on this. Oh, that's Star Wars. That's our stuff, right? So yeah, that's what's called appropriation or influence. However, I don't begrudge them that, but I want my message out too. I want my culture to be put out there. No one's going to do it but me, so I'm doing it right now. So Chancellor Katehi, you got taken down by Yojimbo, and if you want to see the video that did it, ladies and gentlemen, some of you may already have. It's got over 70,000 views, and originally it got hundreds of thousands overnight. And it's still up there. Check it out. It's where I talked with a friend of mine about Katehi, and we did a cultural forensics rundown on her. And the big boys at the corporate offices of the University of California, they all saw that, and that was the beginning of the end for her. So when I'm presenting this information about Rachel Denholder, that's how I'm viewing this book. That's how I'm approaching our struggle to recapture the American Republic. I've been there. I've done that. And I'm going to keep doing it, right? Just because I'm not in the academic setting. I mean, that's freed me, really. It's liberated me. They unleashed their worst nightmare when they conspired to get rid of me. And I don't know how long it's going to last, but baby, I'm going to take advantage of it while I can. So look out. I'm coming to get you. That's from Jimi Hendrix, who by the way, was swept off the board at age 26. It was, you know the story. He was murdered. As I told the co-chancellor, if you're worried about me, as I told maybe you are, maybe not, but let's say because people ask me, aren't you scared? Aren't you worried? No, I'm not. Because as I told the co-chancellor, and there was a shadow chancellor, it wasn't just Katehi. There was a guy there in the background, and I made an appointment up on the 5th floor. I've told you the story before, so forgive me if you heard it before. He was sitting in the background taking notes, and I knew who the real puppet master was him, and he did have a title of co-chancellor. It's like having a co-president. And I knew he was the real power behind the throne. So the day after Donald Trump, remember, I voted for him not because I thought he was savior. I voted for him because he was disruptor. But the day after Donald Trump won the election, I called up I'm not going to mention his name. I think he's still there. He's a local guy. He doesn't even have a graduate degree. He's not an academic. He's an enforcer. He has a master's degree from UC Davis. So he's one of the old boy, probably Freemasonic Jesuit connection that runs the university in Davisville, California. But I called him up the day after. I'm sorry, I'm going to get to Rachel Den Hollander in a moment. Fortunately, we have 25 minutes left. But I just want to finish the story. I want to tell you that I've been through this process, and I'm telling you that you can emerge on top. Maybe not final victory, because the UC is still there. And it's going to still be promoting its own anti-human agenda until we wrest control over the university system, which works for us, not for the corporations, not for Monsanto, not for Bayer or for IG Farben or for Monsanto or Motorola or whoever else. All right. So anyway, I called him the day after. I think I've told the story, so let me quickly for the record. I called him up, this guy, the co-chancellor, and I said, hey, in light of the recent results of Donald Trump being elected to the presidency, would you like to sit down with me so we can revisit the issues that you're trying to raise about my future with the University of California? And that was the last time he talked to me, because I told him before I ended the conversation on phone, I said, you're not going to win. I said, you cannot kill a dead man. I said, I'm approaching my battle with you as if I'm already dead. And I am approaching our struggle to win back the American Republic right now in 2022 as if I was already dead. Okay. And man, it's so liberating. And how did I get that? I got that from studying Bushido. That's the warrior code. Not Quentin Tarantino, not Mr. Miyagi bullshit, right? I'm talking about the real stuff here. Okay. And so the people from Sicily, your Italian and your Irish mafia, your the Israeli mob, the Mossad, the Ukrainian mobsters they're all fighting amongst each other now. They want to pick apart America, and they want us to be the collateral damage in this struggle. I understand them. I understand their mindset, and we have mutual respect. I've dealt with people from these different worlds. I mean, I have my soldiers as well. The problem with the guy, the co-chancellor and Katehi, is they were watching Mr. Miyagi movies. They were watching Kung Fu movies or something, and they mistook me as being from that tradition. So again, that's how you could use being underestimated to your advantage, because they did not really realize what a mean MF I could be, but they found out. And they're going to find out more because they're dealing with a dead man. Remember? Liberation. Yeah. Okay. By the way, I think Rachel Den Hollander had that same approach in her I think it almost got to 20 years before she could bring her abuser, which is Larry Nassar, to justice. It took her years, and she was struggling through all those years. In the interim, she had met a nice guy who was very helpful in her multi-year struggle. She had had 3 children, and she was pregnant with her 4th child when she was going into the last stage of testimony and trying to bring this creep to justice. And he was going to grad school. She had finished college and got certificates and finished law school, passed the bar exam. They did all their study, and they're trying to fight this monster. I'm not just talking about Nasser. I'm talking about USAG, and I'm talking about Michigan State University and their president, who, by the way, was taken down too. She resigned in ignominy. So again, do I have to list all the victories that we can achieve if we just commit ourselves, our lives, to achieving the higher justice? No, there are too many examples. I'll be spending days and days talking about the victories. And what that does, by the way, it just becomes self-satisfying, self-congratulatory exercises that results in complacency and letting down. No, you should always operate as if you are in trying to play catch up, even though you're in the lead, and even though you're succeeding. Always have that mentality. Like, who was it said that in baseball? Don't look back. Someone might be catching up on you. That's the way I always have always operated. And if you approach life that way, you're going to have more W's than L's. Although, as we know, there's no final victory until you're dead. And maybe even then, we don't know if it's a victory. Maybe we'll be reborn into a worse life. If you're not Christian, I mean, that might be your fate, right? But anyway, let me get back to some of the strategies and some of the tactics here, how we're going to win back the American Republic. Now, since we're talking about Italy and the Italian contribution to strategy and tactics, I mean, we know about Machiavelli, the Prince, and the discourses. And Machiavelli also wrote plays, kind of light entertainments, talking about power and struggle and infidelity, romance, mandragola. I'm speaking of that, some ancient herbology, really funny stuff. Really, and he was intending to be funny, by the way. He was a versatile humanist. Machiavelli. He understood humanity, how base we are, but how noble we are at the same time. Right, somewhere between God and the angels. That's where human beings are. We're flawed, but so he's misunderstood. But to a certain extent. But not many of you know about Antonio Gramsci. And the reason I'm mentioning this somewhat obscure, unless you're a leftist or in academia or a sociology major, you would never have heard of Antonio Gramsci. But most of you have heard about cultural Marxism. When people say knowingly, and usually they don't know anything about it, utter the word, this is your Ben Shapiro's, your Bonginos, and all these people who spend most of their time complaining and being victims instead of coming up with solutions to our problems here and our issues. They're busy name calling. I'm glad to see that Owen Schroyer and InfoWars and Alex Jones have gotten over making fun of Trigglypuff, and they don't even talk about CRT. And they're getting down to brass tacks about how we're going to, what the strategies are to get back on track here to win the Republic. And I support Alex Jones. Despite his foibles, and I support him through the current investigation that he's being subjected to, that is intended to put him behind bars. I'm pretty sure that's the objective there. And I think he's playing it pretty wisely and craftily. He's using strategy. He's using tactics. He has people that he consult with, and I'm giving a public expression of support for Alex Jones and his struggles right now, because despite some of his foibles and quirks, perhaps, and mistakes, which he fully admits to. There are not very many people in media that will admit to mistakes that they have made, but he's one of them. So that makes him an exceptional human being, an exceptional man. He mans up to issues, and we're with you, Alex Jones. At least I am. You can make your own decision. But Gramsci is the one that says because he's a communist, right? He wants to take over the Italian republic for the communist rule. But he says the Catholic Church is too strong. So what do we have to do? We have to win back the hearts and minds of the Italian people through the culture. We have to change their perceptions. And we're going to do it through cinema, writing, poetry, theater, right? Breitbart had a similar. He's not a Gramscian, quite the opposite, but he had a similar approach, saying that politics is downstream from culture. Yeah, that was his formula. That was his little quip, his saying that he was well known for. But it was Gramsci that really implemented it. And in the case of Gramsci, it worked. It didn't work not only in Italy, but it also worked in the US. The Gramscian perspective is what the philosophy, the ideology, the behavior that is running behind all the programs, the ops, the psyops that are running in the background here, right? And I studied these. I studied these in graduate school, and never in my wildest imagination did I think that the Gramscian perspective would ever. By the way, I just had a flashback. See, I'm always talking about myself because I lived uh, a life. All right, I've been around so long that you're going to have experiences. But it just reminded me when I was teaching at UCLA. This is years ago. I was teaching in the film school, by the way. Film, television, and theater. It was a school of film, one of the top in the country. USC, UCLA, NYU. Those are the big three that are usually mentioned. But I was teaching there for a year, and my office mate was this guy from Britain, because Britain has a very strong Gramscian Marxist tradition, especially amongst the New Left. But he was my office mate was the English language translator of the prison notebooks of Antonio Gramsci. This is the guy was the roommate, the office mate of the guy who translated English, and he was responsible for creating this text that everybody read in grad school, including myself, and it became part of the curriculum, became part of teacher education, right? That was my office mate. Anyway, that's just an aside. You may think, oh, there he goes, he's ego tripping again. No, I'm just telling you about my life and my struggles and how they intersect with. This is not textbook stuff for me. This is material. This is history that I've lived. And for all you nitpickers out there, thank me for that instead of saying, well, it's actually Maureen Sullivan, not Margaret Sullivan. Yeah, I knew that, dimwit or nitpicker. If you have something substantive to say, please tell me. I'm taking too much time during the shout outs at the beginning of the show, and I'll think about it and I'll change accordingly. But don't do any of the nitpicking, because you're getting us off track here and you're missing the whole plot line anyway. Maybe that's your function. Maybe that's your paid employment, is to go to sites and try to catch someone in an era who's largely speaking extemporaneously, like myself, going off memory and nitpicking them to death. You know what a nitpick? You might not be familiar, nitpicker, with the etymology, the origins of that phrase. It's really a good one. These people who come up with images and language, people have a love for words. Man, you gotta love them. But a nit is the eggs of lice, right? It's in your hair. I don't know if I ever had lice. Maybe I do now and don't even realize it. But there's animals. Most of them have lice, but humans get lice too. But there's an egg, and it's called a nit, and they're really, really small. It's hard, you can't see them. You have to really look with the naked eye. But they're so small, they're hard to get away with. They're really hard to kill, but you have to pick them out one by one, right? So that's a nitpicker. That's you. So before you make one of these comments here below, just think of that image of you picking out lice eggs. Does you really want your life to be spent in such an unprofitable pursuit? No. Why don't you read Rachel Denhollander and study about Simone Biles, which is an incredible find for me. I knew she's a gymnast, a contemporary gymnast, an active gymnast. I knew about her bombing out. I think it was the Tokyo Olympics. Again, nitpicker, you can correct me if it was Tokyo. It was someone. It was major international competition. Simone Biles said, "I'm not going to do it because of my mental health." So I said, "Oh, good for her." It's incredible for her to pull back from that. But then later, in researching articles for this talk right here, I found out that she's been publicly critical of all these different interlocking agencies that have the monopoly on guiding, directing, and informing amateur gymnastics in the United States of America. And she's called them out. So Simone Biles, I tip my hat to you. There's another win, right? We have allies in every single human endeavor, in every single institution. Who would have thought that a gymnast? I certainly didn't expect it. That's why I'm telling you here, who's bringing these people, calling them to account here in 2021, 2022. So the beat goes on, And perhaps, who knows, maybe she read Rachel Denhollander's book or knows her, and because they're all part of the same gymnast community. They're all, and by the way, that's one of the reasons why Dr. Larry Nassar, and I say Dr. Sarkisian because he got stripped of his license, as I said. Let's call him Larry Nassar because I'm just Larry. What he did not anticipate, and what the people who were protecting him, which were Michigan State University personnel, all the way up to the president who had to resign, just like Linda Katehi in ignominy, right? What they did not anticipate was that people have a very strong loyalty to one another. And especially if you're in a team sport. I know gymnastics, you have individual competition, but cumulatively, the team benefits. There's a score and the team wins based on individual performance. So they have that ethos that's bred into them, which is good. It's healthy and it's strong. And by the way, I'm for, even though it may sound like I'm disparaging amateur, I am for amateur athletics. I'm for professional athletics, but I'm for the healthy version of both of those. I don't know, it's tough physically to excel at a high level, but that's another discussion. But I don't want you to, I'm not going to go in the direction, let's get rid of the Olympics, let's get rid of amateur sports. I think children need sports. They need intellectual nourishment, physical nourishment, nutritional nourishment. They need to get it from spiritual nourishment. They need to get it from all angles. They have to see what their physical limits are. They have to test themselves, and they have to learn discipline and learn a little bit of pain, struggle, disappointment. I was a little leaguer, I was a Pop Warner, and man, I didn't want to make winning a habit. It hurt. I would cry. I was so emotional that I was just, this is when I was in, little league and whatnot. So I don't want to give you the impression that I'm down on this. Quite the opposite. Okay, let me finish up then with some other comments about strategies here. Okay. I should here's the strategy, and I'm not telling you to do this, but Rachel Denhollander and her husband Jacob, I don't know if that's his real name, but this is just her husband, were taking their problems to the church that they belong to. They're both believers, and I guess you could call them conservative. They homeschool their children, right? So I'm on their side automatically because it sounds like they had their heads screwed on straight. And the church that they belonged to didn't want to hear about it, especially since that church was having its own scandals. And by the way, Rachel Denhollander says that when she was 7 years old, I believe, was molested by one of the Sunday school teachers there at the church. And then her mother, who was always very protective, both of her parents, her mother in particular, were very, very good parents, hands-on, always watching and protective, and very strong relationship. Okay, so you're not going to be able to blame her. Her mother did a great job. But her mother had also been sexually abused, that she later told her daughter, Rachel Denhollander, about. And they tried to achieve justice or rectify the situation in the church, and they didn't want to hear about it. In fact, some of the church members, some of the movers and shakers in that particular church said, "No, you're a troublemaker," and blah blah. We're not going to. So they left the church. All right. So it may sound easy enough to you, but hey, listen, if you have kids going to church, it might not be as easy as you think it is. But they did change to a different church, and at the new church they found support and active support, not just, they're there, but active support by their new church. So that's, again, it's part of, if you want to call it that, strategy, a tactic. And these all little hints are not hints. They're more than hints. These anecdotes are told, and I'm trying to pick them up and seeing how we can benefit from her struggles and her strategies, which part legal. She's an attorney, so she takes us through all the legal wranglings. And by the way, I also learned that this is something new, that one of the attorneys, his name was, I can't remember, he was an attorney, again, a good one. And they're getting paid. All right, let's not forget they're professionals. They need to get paid, right? And they did get paid, but I'm not saying they were in it for mercenary purposes. But they did get paid because there needs to be a punitive damage. There needs to be compensation for professionals here. But anyway, it was the attorney that said, "Hey, why don't we use Title IX in order to get justice?" Because there's instead of doing just a criminal indictments and prosecution in the civil courts, do it through the Civil Rights Commission with Title IX. And I said, "Oh, that's great. I'm going to file that one away." So you keep that in mind. I don't have time to go through what Title IX is, but uh, from what I can tell, I read the book all the way through very carefully. I don't think Den Hollander explained adequately where Title IX came from. And again, I'm going to have to check back. I haven't had the opportunity to do it yet, right? I have to go live at 3 o'clock today. But I think Title IX came out of the Civil Rights Act of 1965. All right. So here's an example where civil rights legislation helped protect individuals as it was intended to do, because part of Title IX of the Civil Rights Act of 1965 is specifically meant to guard the rights and protections of minorities, including women. It's I think it focuses on women's civil rights or female civil rights in specific. So you're not going to be able to completely dismiss, oh, there's critical race theory. It all started going wrong in the 60s, the civil rights movement. And yeah, there are a lot of people who exploited it, have gamed the system. BLM and Antifa are using the goodwill of the American people and the system in order to promote their violence. It's not even Gramscian, it's more like Maoism right now, revolutionary Maoism in the streets here. Right, burning churches and attacking police departments, getting away with it. It's gone far beyond Gramsci, but that was the foundation of it. I think the origins of it here in America, right? So don't dismiss the whole civil rights. It was positive. It was positive by and large. It was positive. And in this case, Title IX of the Civil Rights Act of 1965. This is what Martin Luther King Jr. sacrificed his life for. This is what Malcolm X was sacrificed his life for. This is what tons of people, right? Tons of unnamed people that we don't even know about. Faceless people rode on the buses, the Freedom Riders. This is what they struggled for. And in 20, years later, I forgot the year where this was finally settled with Larry Nassar. Years later, they were able to draw back on that heritage. Again, it comes right out of the Anglo-Saxon legal tradition, and also the Christian restorative justice tradition. Martin Luther King Jr. came from a line, and I think his grandfather, definitely, maybe his grandfather, were pastors, were ministers, as long as, his grandfather. And on his mother's side, they were from ministers. So there's the combination of Christian higher justice, as well as with the civil law, criminal system, common law system, that combines to help we Americans develop and craft a republic that used to be, or probably still is, a beacon in the world. And that's why we're not going to surrender it. And that's why we're taking it back. Man, my gosh, we've even forced Robert Malone out of the laboratory to expose himself to public scrutiny. Most people never knew about. I knew about him years ago. I read all that literature. And as I mentioned on another show, another podcast, was John B. Wells' show. That was part of my research. I was looking at the whole pharmaceutical medical complex, relating it to biowarfare and eugenics and all that, because a lot of my students wanted to be doctors and researchers and PhDs or pharmaceutical reps and all that. So I said, well, I better let them know what they're in for when they graduate from UC Davis, because they think they're going to solve the cure to cancer, right? Little do they know that they're probably going to be enlisted in efforts to hurt and harm humanity, even though they didn't go into it with that assumption. And again, I don't want to brush everybody with the same aspersions that I'm casting here, but there are a lot of cynics out there who'll do anything in order to make a living at our expense. Okay, so just to show you, I talked about the university complicity, right? Michigan State University, the coaches, the athletic trainers, and at least this is in the Den Hollander book on page 239. At least 3 different sports departments were known to have received explicit warnings and reports, descriptions about the abuses committed by one Dr. Larry Nassar, and they sat on it. Right. The police department, Michigan State Police Department. Here's another point before I leave. The Michigan State Police Department had taken reports, and they dragged their feet for a year and a half. But at the end, they came through. There were paper trails that were created by people saying, well, I'm not be able to get immediate justice now, but I'm going to create a paper trail so that in the future, if someone like a Rachel Den Hollander comes through, it'll be there. The records will be there. I mean, you can build on that, right? So there's that strategy, a long-term strategy there. But I'll leave you with this warning, and it reminded me of my own situation when I went to the UC Davis Police Department to report students who were coming into my classes who were sent probably from the counseling psychology department, women's studies, and these departments sent in there as provocateurs to disrupt my classes, especially towards, and they were harassing. It's called faculty mobbing, right? I read the literature. I knew what was going on, and it had been going on for about a couple of years. And so, but I went to the police department and I filed a report on it, made sure that I got all the dates down. And I went back to the classroom. I said, I told the students, I filed a report, an incident report. It's on the record there. And if you want to keep making trouble, I'm going to have the police come right to the classroom. They're going to take you right out and they're going to arrest you. And I had done that before. You don't do it yourself. You have the police department do it, and there'll be a record of it, whatever happens. And that all came out with my hearings. I had two separate administrative hearings, not because of anything happening with these police actions, but because of what I was teaching. I was teaching about Big Pharma. I was teaching about eugenics. I was teaching about the abortion industry. I was teaching about Planned Parenthood. I was teaching about genocide. All right. I said, this is what I'm here to do. That's why they had the 2 hearings. And that's why Linda Katehi was losing a grip on her administration. That's why the University of California has to institute immediately, and this holds true for all public and private institutions around the country, the United States of America. You better start getting it together right now, right? Before we start going in on you, because that's the next stage, right? Big Pharma is crumbling. The consensus, the political consensus amongst everyday people, as that we do not believe in your institutions. We're not supporting them. And that message from the American people is reverberating in the halls of Davos, probably even in the NATO headquarters in Brussels, right? People power, and our friends in Britain and Australia, and New Zealand and Canada and Hong Kong, everywhere, man. It's let freedom ring, right? Oh my gosh. Let's keep it going, ladies and gentlemen. I'm running out of time here. I'm sorry I couldn't take any questions, but I'm glad that most of you stayed to the very end. I hope that today's talk gave us some indication. I talked a lot about myself, but I'm just sharing you personal information that lets you know that at least one case and many, many others, right? Den Hollander, you can and you will prevail, right? Don't let them convince you otherwise. It's attitude, right? It's your mentality, it's your mindset. And if you approach these situations like Rachel Den Hollander or Simone Biles, I might be mispronouncing her name, or like close to 200 athletes, amateur athletes who had been abused by Larry Nassar. There was tons of people that came forward and put him in jail. And then it's an indictment of the system, this athletic system. So let's take that energy. Let's take that wherewithal, that improvement. We're gaining, we're growing, we're becoming more mature about our society, American society in specific, right? And we're becoming better. We're becoming, we have, right, slippages, right? We do some backsliding in general, but we're moving ahead. We're moving ahead. And even after 2 years of tyranny, we're going to break through it and we're going to move beyond it. And we're going to become better, a better nation, better society, a better world from this experience here, this trial, this incredible trial that each of us are being put through right now. So, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you back on Thursday. And guess what? I'm going to be sharing the stage with your friend and my friend, Manny Grossman. Yes, he makes a repeat visit on Thursday, and I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, we're going to talk about going back decades, revisiting the Son of Sam, and seeing how it's completely changing our perceptions today of history and where it goes and our power structure here in 2022. We're finding out these were not one-off crimes by some madman called David Berkowitz. We're seeing that that was an operation that goes to the highest reaches and levels of government. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Yojimbo strategy. Get the information, get the story together, get your allies, your soldiers together, and use their massive power and strength and size advantage against them and have them neutralize themselves. That's the Yojimbo strategy, and I'll be talking more about that when I have future talks shortly. I'm reading the literature right now. I'm trying to figure out how to present it to you here in a talk. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for your kind attention. We'll see you back on Thursday. Bye. By the way, I also have a session later that day with my friend and colleague, John O'Laughlin. So I'm looking forward to that. Great. We're going to end with the month of January on a strong, positive note. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I bid you good day.